Hi, this is the Philosophical Angle program, and I'm your host, Chris Angle. The purpose of the Philosophical Angle is to examine the nature of concepts and ideas in current media. I'm the author of 5 books on philosophy known as the Detmar-Haskell Dialogues, and they are the nature of aesthetics, the nature of ethics, the nature of truth, the philosophical equations of economics, the nature of the political left and right. If you'd like to comment, you can give us a shout at detmar.haskell, Haskell spelled with 2 L's, at icloud.com. And so now we're going to discuss this week's subject, which is the Minnesota-Somali Fraud, and why it happened. And as we all have heard in the news about the Somali population in Minnesota allegedly defrauding various parts of the U.S. and Minnesota state governments, we need to discuss why this did happen and what can be done about preventing fraud in the future. And we ask this question because we've noticed that fraud against the state or federal government is common. But it is not common against private enterprise. Why is that? Why does that happen? Why is it that against private enterprises, fraudulent activity is very difficult, but against the government, it's evidently very easy, and the amounts of funds are huge? This is tens of millions, maybe billions of dollars are involved. I mean, you can't imagine someone defrauding a company like Ford or General Motors or GE or any other company to that extent, can you? Why not? What's the difference? Why should fraud be so much easier against the U.S. government and against the Minnesota state government than it is against a private enterprise? Let's delve into the nature of this problem and see if we can find a solution. So the first thing we're going to talk about is, why did this happen? Just as a preliminary opening statement to the problem. Then, in a second broadcast subsequently to this, we will present a solution on how to stop the corruption. And so now, we'll discuss why corruption happens and why there are criminals. First, there are 7 dictums that control the mind of a criminal. The first one is that all life does that which is good for it, and continually does that which is good for it. It's pretty much a universal truth. Biologically speaking, we just are programmed to protect ourselves and to do that which is good for us, and continually to do that which is good for us. The second principle, from St. Augustine's principle of Libido Dominandi, which is that men tend to dominate. Men tend to dominate others, just as the advanced mammals do. Thirdly, there is the thought that in a criminal mind that the other person is bad, that the perpetrator who wants to do a criminal activity is good, and the other person, his target, is bad. The fourth principle comes from the advent of socialism, originating in the early 1800s, of the theory of noblesse oblige. And it is that there is a social contract that the haves of society will provide for the have-nots of society. And in the criminal's mind, this contract has been broken, and the haves owe him compensation, and he should be able to collect it. So the Somali criminals, allegedly a criminal, want to do good for themselves, principle number 1. Principle number 2 is that the Somalis want to dominate their target, which is, of course, the government and their various welfare programs. Principle number 3 says that the Somali feels that the U.S. government or the Minnesota state government are bad because they broke the contract that existed between the government and the Somali people. They have been settled into Minnesota and they're receiving welfare, but it's not enough. So the government is bad because they don't really give us enough money. Besides, the government has unlimited money. Why not spend it or spread it around a little bit? We deserve it. Or so one would think, right? Next, the contract has been broken. Therefore, it's justified to do a fraudulent act against the various government programs. Next, principle number 5 is the famous Lord Acton aphorism, which says that power tends to corrupt and absolute power corrupts absolutely. The reason why this is applicable is that once a scheme has been created in the mind and the criminal feels that he is justified by principle 2 and or 3, the criminal will now feel empowered to execute an illicit action. This feeling of the ability to control another brings corruption to their mind because they now feel that they are justified, and because they feel power in their ability to fraudulently take money from their victim, which is the U.S. government or the state government. Next, when you're in total control and subject to the Lord Acton principle, then you lose all sense of ethics. The reason why you are no longer ethical is because the perpetrator's priorities are the only priorities being considered. And when you have only your priorities in your mind, then you lose all respect for the other individual. And when you lose respect, you realize you don't have to cooperate with them. And when you don't cooperate with them, you don't have ethics, because ethics is the appropriate dispensation of respect. And respect is the evolutionary mechanism by which humans use to cooperate with each other in order to produce goods and services, and fulfills us in our lives and brings us up away from misery. So now, we know why Somalis would rationalize fraud even though they've been presented with a nice life here in the United States, and one that is much better than that which lies back in where they came from, I would imagine. I know that I wouldn't want to be rehoused in Somalia with all the strife and killing and war between the Muslims and the non-Muslims. So here we have it. The Minnesota Somalis are ready to perpetrate a fraudulent act against the government welfare programs. Okay, so thanks very much, and tune in to the subsequent broadcast, which we will give a solution to this problem of corruption against a government.